Welcome to the Under 8 Podcast, a daily college basketball show brought to you every weekday in under 8 minutes. At the time of recording, it is Sunday, January 7th, 2:33 in the afternoon. My name is Josh Mullenix. On today's pod, Purdue, UNC, Tennessee all get top 25 wins. It's all right now on the Under 8 Podcast. Josh Doering is here with me, Josh, on a night where Zach Edey was the fourth leading scorer for the Purdue Boilermakers. Matt Painter's squad, 83-78 over Illinois at Mackey Arena. Simultaneously, times where Braden Smith looked like the first team All-American. Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith together looked like the best backcourt in the country. And then there were also times where you saw what we've been seeing from Purdue's backcourt for the last 18 months. It was a Purdue game that was at times dominant and at times reminded me why there are plenty of people who don't really care what Purdue's going to do and want to see them make it through the NCAA tournament.
It was kind of a perfect summary of Purdue, right? Yeah. Play them off the floor in the first half. Looks like this isn't even a contest. And then it was never really in the balance, but Illinois certainly got back into the game and made it way more interesting than it should have been. Yeah, a very good kind of just overall summary of the confusing thing that is this Purdue team most of the time. I want to start with this, though. So Trey Kaufman-Renn, you mentioned, Zach Edey had foul trouble in the first half, did not have a particularly good game. He, Smith, and Lawyer were only 10 of 25 from the field for 29 points. That's usually a recipe for beating Purdue, except Trey Kaufman-Renn was the best player on the floor in the first half. How many teams have, at a bare minimum, 4, and I would argue at least 5, because Mason Gillis has done it at times too, different players who can be the best player on the floor in any given half? It's a remarkable thing that I don't think it's talked enough about this team because Zach Edey gets so much attention because he's the best player in the country.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's also important to caveat in a game of this magnitude, in a game of
definitely,
because there are 9 players on Kentucky's team that could be the best player on the team against Northern Kentucky, right? But against Illinois, yeah, it's a lot of putting together a crazy good regular season. A lot of winning the NCAA tournament is getting lucky in the games where your best players aren't awesome by somehow having the best player on the floor regardless. And because, Carson Edwards will get you most of the way there, or Kyle Guy and Ty Jerome will get you most of the way there, or, insert any star on a team that you'd like to, Jordan Hawkins and Adamas Nogo, but then Andre Jackson is the best player on the floor for, chunks of the NCAA tournament. Tristan Newton. Right. Absolutely. And right. We'll see. This is the same group of guys that was there last year, obviously, but Kaufman-Renn's a year older. Kaufman-Renn probably didn't have this in his tank last year. So maybe this is the year that Purdue has enough guys that can kind of pull them through a half, even when their guys maybe aren't whether it's foul trouble or just not making shots, aren't having the games that they usually do. And maybe that's the difference of them putting together a run this year, but it's a good point. I wasn't before Friday, I would have told you Trey Kaufman-Renn wasn't capable of that. So that's an interesting development.
Right. We're not talking about the other guys in the starting lineup here. We're talking about guys to come off the bench.
Right.
Because the pieces just fit better together. Well, that's hard to say that way, in the sense that, Zach Edey's in foul trouble. Well, let's run some more Trey Kaufman-Renn and some more Caleb first, give a completely different look to Illinois. And yeah, he was absolutely fantastic. And then Zach Edey came back in the second half and started doing his thing, and Trey Kaufman-Renn became a complimentary role player again. But I just firmly believe this is the best version of the Zach Edey iteration of Purdue. That they are a significantly relative to the amount of improvement they can have from last season, a significantly better team this season. because of the development of Kaufman-Renn. You add another piece, a perimeter defender, your guards are a year older. They can just survive some of this. On the Illinois side, the one thing I wanted to throw out there that we've talked a little bit about, but I kind of summarized it more, as you saw them get back into this game again, obviously without Terrence Shannon Jr. I know they didn't win, but also there might not be a team in the country that wins that game this year because that's the best team in the country playing in one of the best home environments in the country. Mm-hmm. Would you agree, and we're going to talk about him in a little bit, but the Terrence Shannon and Dalton Knecht are kind of on the same level in terms of, right, all-American caliber players?
I would probably put Terrence Shannon a half step above Dalton Knecht, but I don't have any. I don't feel completely offended by that. No.
Yeah, which is only going to prove my point further. That because I agree with you that if it's a 1A, 1B maybe kind of tier thing. But yeah, we'll just say Shannon's okay, a little bit higher on that hierarchy. No problem with that. The net loss, the impact of losing those players, to me, losing Terrence Shannon on this Illinois team has much less of an impact than losing a Dalton Knecht who's not as good on that Tennessee team. And we're going to talk about this weekend didn't exactly prove it from the Tennessee standpoint, but we talk about how Dalton Knecht might be the most important player in the country because of what he unlocks to that Tennessee team. Mm-hmm. It's the opposite for Illinois for me. Not that Terrence Shannon isn't a great player, but that you have guys in Domask and Hawkins and Quincy Guerrier who can all elevate to fill that void in a way that you can't fill the void if you're Dalton Knecht in Tennessee. That's the point I'm trying to articulate with this Terrence Shannon thing, and you saw it again in this game. Because they are still awfully good without him on the floor. Maybe they can't reach the same heights that they could have. We're not going to know, probably. But this is still a top 3 team in the Big Ten, even without him.
You know, the thing that enables what you're saying is that Marcus Domask might just be a dude. Like he might actually be one of the 15 best players in the country, and we just didn't know it.
Yep.
Because I mean, we saw the flashes, but we've done this every time that he's had a good game.
Yep.
Yes, he had 33 against Florida Atlantic. It took him like 4 games prior to get to 33 points across those 4 games.
Now he's option A on offense.
Right. And you know, when the 3 times this season he's taken at least, I'm looking at the KenPom splits, so don't make me do quick math here. The 3 times this season he's taken at least 14 2-point field goal shots. He's scored 33 points, 32 points, and 26 points. So maybe he's just that good. And the reality of playing with Terrence Shannon Jr. is that it doesn't matter how good you are, you're not as good as Terrence Shannon Jr.
Right.
And that's because you're right. I think there was somebody on the Illinois roster to temper that, and we weren't totally aware of that. Now it's become quickly obvious that Domask as the number 1 option is not something that Brad Underwood is going to lose sleep over. But it's painfully obvious that there's nobody who's making up for what Dalton Knecht does for Tennessee.
Yeah. That's all
at the same time with Purdue, I'm glad they're up 66-45, because if they were up 60-45, they might have found a way to lose the game. Yep. So it's equal. It's the same. It's different, but it's still frustratingly close to the same. I just love to be like, I texted somebody early in that game and said, dude, Braden Smith is like a first team All-American caliber guard. And then they just like, it's like he and Fletcher just like forget how to play basketball for 4-minute stretches in the second half. Like it's the same, it's different, but it's the same. In the ACC over the weekend as well, number 8 UNC, number 16 Clemson. UNC holding Clemson to just 55 points on the evening. That is a Clemson team that's ranked top 25 in the country offensively at KenPom. They dropped to 11-3. UNC boasts now an 11-3 record. 65-55. What say you about this one for the Tar Heels?
The biggest thing coming out of this from a UNC perspective for me is 2 things that go together, but they gave up 21 points in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like this was comprehensive from start to finish. They won this game in the second half, and they won it on defense primarily because of what Armando Bacot did. And I know you want Bacot to get more touches, and we can have that discussion another day. What I was thinking about watching this was, though, if he's doing this defensively, he is still an awfully impactful player, even if he's not living up to his full offensive potential, because RJ Davis might just be that good that you got to really lean into him because of the numbers he's putting up this season. Now, he had a bad first half. Cormac Ryan said, no worries, kept him in the game. Then things kind of stabilized in the second half. But that was what stood out to me from a North Carolina perspective is if they're doing this defensively with the offensive firepower they have, they are probably the best. I mean, they're certainly right now looking like the best team in the ACC. They're maybe a top 5 team in the country when they play defense like this.
Yeah, it's one of those teams that they've kind of beat up in terms of defense on the bad teams that they've played, the teams that aren't super threatening offensively. You also look, and they gave up, over 80 points to Kentucky. They gave up 87 points to Kentucky. They gave up 87 points to UConn. They gave up 83 points to Villanova. Those are their 3 losses. So it's funny because it's the 16th ranked defense at KenPom. I would never describe it as a top 20 defense in the country.
Yeah.
But they also only gave up 52 to Riverside. They gave up only 69 to Northern Iowa. They only gave up 60 to Charleston Southern. They haven't given up over 70 points since the loss to Kentucky on December 16th. They haven't given up over 60 points since December 20th to Oklahoma. So maybe that's just what's happening here is that they're figuring out how to play defense effectively. They've now played 3 ACC games. They are first in the ACC in defense, first in effective field goal percentage, and that's despite being last in the conference in turnover percentage. So maybe that's the thing that you'd really like to see over the next couple months increase is turning guys over. But if you're going to play, if you're going to defend the 3-point line, the 2-point, inside the arc and do that kind of thing, then maybe it's something you can get around.
What are the other impacts of that? PJ Hall fouled out for a second game in a row.
Yep.
He's got to stay on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Clemson is just not the same team without him on the floor. He's had a little bit of a rough stretch here. The most important thing coming out of this game, though, I want to touch on this real quickly. If I am a team and I am if I'm a big on a team, a 4 or a 5, and Clemson is on my schedule this season, I have one goal coming into that game. You know what that goal is?
Something about getting Ian Shefflin in foul trouble. Something like that.
Close. You're on the right track. My sole goal is I'm not going to be the person that gets yelled at by my coach for Ian Shefflin making me look bad by playing harder than me. Because it happens to at least one player, if not 2 or 3, every single game. He had one possession in this game. He got, I think, unless I'm getting this confused with multiple possessions, he got an offensive rebound. They missed again, and then he tipped the ball out after diving on the floor to get yet another shot. I absolutely love this guy. I needed to bring it up again. That's my goal. I'm not going to be the one when you go review the tape who gets yelled at for Ian Shefflin making you look bad because he's just playing harder and wants it more than you.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that he's just gonna do it. But whatever you're doing in the non-box score categories. And even 16 and 11. It's not like he doesn't show up in the box score. He had 16 points, 11 rebounds, 5 steals, and 4 blocks. So I rescind completely my non-box score compliment there. But yeah, he is nationally, he is top 100 in effective field goal percentage, true shooting percentage. He's top 50 in offensive rating and offensive rebound percentage. He's top 15 in defensive rebounding percentage. He's top 400 in block percentage. He's top 400 in free throw rate. He's top 400 in the country individually in 2-point field goal percentage. And he, by the by, he's only taken 14 threes this year, but he's made 8 of them and is shooting 57%. Anything else you want?
He's honestly one of my favorite players in the country. I love watching him. It's great.
PJ Hall will be the one that is a first team all ACC guy. And when you look back on a Clemson season, if they remain kind of in the top 25 all year, maybe make it to the second weekend, that kind of thing, it will be, PJ Hall will be the first sentence for Brad Brownell's squad this year, but Ian Shefflin is doing the thing as well. Really fun player to watch. Last but not least, is the following too blunt? Ole Miss played a real basketball team and got shown the door in said basketball game.
Maybe that's slightly disrespectful to Tennessee.
And maybe Memphis as well.
Yes, and there's that Memphis win. Yeah. But outside
Tennessee 90, Ole Miss 64. This is an Ole Miss team that has impressively remained, just inside the top 100 at KenPom and just lost their first game of the season. A 90-64 loss to Tennessee. Tennessee made 11 threes. They shot 47% as a team. Kind of cruised, and then you take a look and you think, man, Mississippi Ole Miss really, really, doesn't get a ton of love. And this is one where the metrics were patient, and they it was, at least on this particular Saturday, not a good look for Chris Beard's team.
No, the questions were valid coming into the game. It's what made this so interesting. Now, were they supposed to win this game? No. They got out rebounded by 23. They attempted 18 fewer shots. Tennessee had 19 offensive rebounds. And by the way, Tennessee scored 90 points. Dalton Knecht took 6 shots. I know he's in a little bit of a rough patch here, and this game did not help that. They need to fix it. But Jonas Adu had 24, so it was all okay. And they played really good defense, so they didn't need Dalton Knecht. But again, they scored 90, and Dalton Knecht, who you and I are both on board, might be the most important player in the country, didn't even contribute that much, and they didn't need him to. This Tennessee team might just be significantly better offensively, even without Dalton Knecht, and then you throw him into the equation. But I'm starting to wonder if we oversimplified it by just saying it's about him, because they're just a really good basketball team that actually has some offensive firepower.
I don't know. They scored 65 against Tarleton State at home 2.5 weeks ago.
It's always going to happen sometimes. This is all relative to what we were expecting, right? They are scoring 70s and 80s.
And Ole Miss is the 130th ranked KenPom team defensively. Like, there's still the foundational. I've not overreacted. I disagree.
Okay.
Everything is different because of Dalton Knecht. Everything.
Yes, fundamentally, I agree with that. I'm just wondering to what degree, and I don't know the answer to that yet.
I know the degree, the one to the 100th degree. It all matters now, because James Adu had 4, 7, and 4 in the most recent points. Sometimes you have a good game.
Yeah, I just wanted to recognize that they scored 90 points without a lot coming from Dalton Knecht. That's all.
Okay. I suppose I can't argue with that, but nothing has changed for Tennessee. Dalton Knecht is still the reason that they are as good offensively as they were.
Yes, for sure.
There you go. 90-64. Not particularly close, right? Not particularly close for Tennessee over Ole Miss. You got anything else from the weekend you want to touch on?
3 things really quickly. One undefeated team remaining on the men's side. That would be, surprise, surprise, Houston. After James Madison lost, and obviously Ole Miss just lost. The more I watch Houston and Kansas play, the more convinced I become that Houston is the better basketball team. I don't care how many games Kansas wins in a row. You look at the box score at halftime, and TCU's close at Fog Allen. Why? Oh, I think they had 1 point, not from those 3 guys. And they got the controversial flagrant foul that then led to the final basket. I don't care what the record is. I'm not going to be impressed with this Kansas team until they figure out somebody else to score. Cincinnati, Seton Hall, big winners of the weekend. Cincinnati goes into BYU, talking about these new Big 12 teams. Very, very impressive from Wes Miller's squad. Seton Hall just beats every really good basketball team they play now, apparently. That's just the world we're living in. And then finally, remember we were talking about Wake Forest when they played Utah? And it was the marquee game of that day that didn't have a lot of great options.
Yep.
And we were talking about, well, hey, when Damari Monsanto comes back, they might have something. Steve Forbes can coach. They've won 9 in a row without Damari Monsanto, by the way. 5 of those wins came over high-major opponents. They beat Miami. They're looking like one of the best teams in the ACC. So I wanted to give Wake Forest a shout out because they are on a roll right now and as hot as any team in the country.
I've got responses to a couple of those things. One, looking at the defense column on Houston's KenPom page is laugh out loud funny. They are first in efficiency, first in effective field goal percentage, first in turnover rate, fourth in 3-point field goal defense, first in 2-point field goals defense, fourth in free throw percentage by opponents, which has nothing to do with Houston.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, that's what they got to fix, obviously.
Of course. First in block percentage, first in steal percentage, first 10th in non-steal turnover percentage. Yeah. And nobody ever scores on them without making a pass first. Like there's no isolation success. 355th in the country in assisted field goals made rate. 62% of field goals made against Houston are assisted. The other thing is I'm out on I might be out on BYU until they beat another competent basketball team.
Yeah. No, that's valid.
Their last since December 1st, they've played Fresno State, Evansville, Utah, Denver, Georgia State, Bellarmine, Wyoming, and Cincinnati. There are 2 teams inside the top 190 at KenPom on that list. Utah and Cincinnati, they lost to both of them.
Yep. This is the question coming into the Big 12. Not can you do it every once in a while? Can you play with the best teams in the Mountain West? Can you show up when every single team can beat you no matter where you're playing? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And since they beat NC State on a neutral on November 24th, the answer to that question is no. So until they do it, I'm out. I don't care how high at KenPom they get. I'm out. I think those are the 2 things I had. What was the third thing you talked about? Wake Forest, sure.
Wake Forest, yeah.
Yeah, and apparently Seton Hall is just the team that absolutely no one wants to play in the Big East.
Yeah, the Big East, that depth is.
Now everyone outside of the Big East would love to play Seton.
Yeah.
But inside the Big East, you don't want to play them.
Yeah.
They're 3-1, and they've already beaten UConn, Providence on the road, and Marquette. Sure.
Yeah. The depth we weren't sure was there in the Big East is very quickly with Seton Hall's resurgence, with St. John's playing better, with Villanova at least being dangerous at times. It's the depth is getting there. Maybe the top 3 haven't delivered quite the way we expected, but that's just an awfully good conference.
There you go. Anything else?
That was all the things I had.
Sure.
A lot of them.
That's the Under 8 podcast in 22 minutes. That's kind of how we roll around here. It is Sunday, January 7th, 2:55 p.m. Thanks so much for being here. We'll be back tomorrow night, Monday, for yet another edition of the show. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your shows. Follow the Under 8 Pod on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube. And we will see you tomorrow.